Yeah.
Oh my god, okay. Are we starting?
No, I'm just hitting record. When you say okay, we're gonna start now, it's a bit like not as natural.
Yeah.
So, so like let me open the video. Hold on.
Oh my god, I'm nervous.
What are you nervous about?
We've never done a video together.
I know, right? That's actually so funny. So what are we talking about, Tazi?
So today we're going to be talking about family and how our family has messed us up. We're going to try and be as open and honest as we can without
Exposing
I don't
people.
know. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit hard, but
No, yeah, we're definitely gonna get exposed.
yeah, this is an exposing video, guys. Enjoy the tea. This is our family from Tara and Xavier. Oh shoot. No, but today me and Xavier wanted to make a video on our family because we're both in the same family. Yet we have very different experiences.
Are we? We're in the same family.
Are we related? No, we have two different experiences, two different sides of our own stories.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about our experiences. And if you don't know me, everybody, from Xavier's thing, Utopia's now. I am Tara Logan.
Like, I'll introduce you. Shut up.
Okay, let's start.
We're going to be talking about family. We're going to be talking about our experiences within our family, and then also like how that impacts other people, and people I'm sure have had similar experiences.
Yeah. And I think it'll be good to start from the beginning for people that don't know us at all. So do you want to start, or should I?
Well, I think I can provide some like context and maybe a bit of understanding, so like people understand what the actual is going on. So Tara and I, we're siblings. We are, how many years apart are we? 5 years apart? 4 years apart. Keeping count.
Doesn't even know the age.
And we're from Australia, and we had the fortunate opportunity to grow up overseas in India as a result of like our dad's work. And I think in most circumstances we lived like really, really privileged lives in that sense, because we were able to travel very often. We lived overseas. We're able to live in big houses, and we had like an extremely lucky upbringing, and I think that's something we're very, very grateful for. And at the same time, I think like every other family, the experiences that those families have and the problems that those families have are unique to their own, and they produce very good experiences and memories, but they also equally produce negative experiences. And we're looking to sort of explore those ideas, and really have an understanding of like how it impacted our family and us, and then also how that can maybe help other people understand, or maybe like normalize a discussion around talking about families not being optimal in some circumstances.
Dysfunctional.
Like I just think like I mean, like you said, Tazi, you said when you were younger you would often look for videos online about people trying to find similar experiences to sort of relate and stuff, and I think that's the intention with this podcast and this conversation.
I think being able to relate to something or feel like someone understands something that is similar to what you're going through really, really helps. So that's what we've decided to do with this podcast.
So take it away.
Okay, where are we gonna start?
We can start from the beginning if you want. So
sure.
Where does Tara's story start?
Well, I was born in Penrith.
Yuck, disgusting.
I didn't grow up here. I moved when I was 3 to India, and we lived there for 10 years, and we had the opportunity to travel during that time we were in India. We had the opportunity to go to so many places and experience so many different things that a lot of people some people will never have experienced in their whole lifetime. So I think the journey starts from moving to India. So how was your experience living in India when you first moved?
I mean, I said to Shashwat on our podcast when we did about our stories, and I was saying how like when I was younger, I didn't even know what moving to another country was. Like I didn't understand. I was too young. I think I was like 6 years old. All I knew is that we were moving. And then we got there, and yeah, I mean, it changed our lives really. I think we both look at it with very fond memories and very positive experiences. And
Okay.
I think it's interesting as well because that experience was shared alongside the experience of family. Like it was like not only did we grow up in an interesting environment, but we also grew up in an interesting family dynamic. And
Yeah.
I think that produced a lot of idiosyncratic, like a lot of unique problems, and also amazing experiences as well.
Yeah. I
Mm.
guess we can talk about our experience living in India with the culture regarding family. Um, I think growing up with our family dynamic, especially in the environment that we were in, because of the culture, and how strong the family unit is in India. Um, I think growing up having that experience of being with families that was so strong and having that around us, it was very easy to compare, and which is comparing is a very dangerous territory. It's easy to compare, and I think because we lived in such a cultured country, um, I think that affected our view and our experiences very differently, and how that affects us today.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure people are wondering, okay, so India has a strong family unit. So what was your family unit like? Or like what was your family like?
Yeah.
I'm saying yours as if it's like we don't have come from the same family, but I'm talking about what was our family like
Yeah.
in that whole experience.
Yeah. Well, for what Zabe was saying, so we originally moved to India because of Dad's job. Um, and for a long time, Dad was very busy with his job. He was always traveling in India and not always at home. And I think that affected us quite a lot because of where we were living also, and having family units be so strong and feeling like we weren't really in a family that was very, very tight knit. Like I said, I don't know about you, but with my experience, I think for a long time, um, it was very hard to be around a lot of families and not being able to not compare. I think it would have been easier to grow up in Australia with having so many people in Western culture. A lot of parents aren't together. I think it would have been a lot easier to experience what was going on in our family. But then again, I think it gave us a lot of insight into a different perspective on how different our experience was.
Yeah. And I mean, going off what you were saying, Tazi, like I mentioned this before when we were recording before, but I think it's important to make it clear, like that in terms of working long hours and parents not being there, that is also a
Mm-hmm.
circumstance of privilege. And there's like a lot of
Yeah,
families around the world that come from much poorer backgrounds where they have to work like all
yeah,
day in order to sustain life. And what we are commenting and critiquing on is explicitly those family that have the capacity to actually take time off or not work as much
yeah,
in order to be with family. And so that's where we're coming from. But yeah, I
yeah,
mean, I think it's really interesting how basically this sort of cross-cultural dimension plays into how we saw family, and then also
mm-hmm.
how if you go to more Western countries where family disputes and maybe divorce is more normalized, it
Mm-hmm.
gives you a very different view of what family looks like. Whereas if you go to
Yeah,
a country like India where divorce is stigmatized or in general,
yeah,
and where family togetherness is sort of a principal value and everyone should remain as one unit, it calls
yeah,
into it calls into it creates very interesting dynamics and very interesting perceptions of what family is. And I think
yeah,
for our family, that or for us, maybe not our family, but for us, it caused some particular um, conflicts and issues.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to point out as well. I was just thinking about it. Um, to give an idea to how it was over there. I remember I used to always go to art shows with mom, and mom had her own business in India. She was a photographer, still is, but in India, she used to go to art shows a lot. A lot of her stuff would be up. And I remember, even if it was mom's art show and it was her own thing going on, there would still always be a person who would come up to you and be like, "What does your husband do?" you know So like, if you think about it, like, that's how strong, like, of a view it is, in India. I think it's very taboo to not be um such a tight-knit, close-knit family. And I think because we were around foreigners as well, I think that also had a strong impact on just our view on family as well.
Mm, yeah. So maybe to give an overview to people so they understand what we're talking about. What was our family like? Like, what was for people are trying to think about, like, okay, so you've talked a lot about, India and the experiences and what family looks like there versus more Western cultures, but like, what actually did your family look like?
Mm.
So what do you think? Oh, yeah.
Well, going back to dad's job and how he was really busy, going back to the comparison stuff, I think with our family unit, we grew up with, I would call it a single parent family
Mm,
household, because a lot of the stuff that happened, I think mom was always really raising us. Uh, and I think watching someone go through a lot of stuff, at least in my experience with mom, I think um, knowing now with what's the word?
the benefit of hindsight.
Yes, that's what it is. Now, the benefit of hindsight, I think you can understand a lot more. But at the time when you're really young, because I was only literally like 5 years old, 6 years old, when a lot of stuff was happening in our family, I think it's really hard to try and understand what's going on when you're that young, because you're only being able to observe and have your own ideas of what possibly could be happening without even really understanding what even the world is yet, even understanding your own feelings. Like, I think with my experience growing up with my emotions and things like that, I think um, being exposed to a lot of really emotional situations when you don't even understand your own emotions yet is quite difficult to learn how to navigate. So I would definitely say that our family unit was a single parent household, and watching that can be quite difficult. And I think mom did a great job, but there's a lot of things that affected us both, even just being in that situation.
Yeah, and I think most people can agree that I think single parents households have their the strong points and their weak points, and I think psychologists have looked a lot into that. But to add
Mm.
on as well, like, I think to give a bit more shade and color to like what was going on.
Mm.
Obviously, we moved as a family to India, but then after we moved to the family, it almost was like our family started to not be a family in terms,
Mm.
and like what that meant was is that my dad was working a lot with his job. I mean, our dad, and he as he progressed with his job, he was working more hours, and as he was working more hours, he was more busy. And what that meant was eventually, at one point of time, he actually moved out of our house, and we're living on our own, us as a family, and mum, and
Yeah.
and also as well, like, amongst, I mean, like, on anticipating all those things happening, there was a lot of things like families fighting and all that stuff. And I think a lot of people can relate to parents arguing and getting into fights, and the results of that eventually being a parent moving out. And although,
Yeah.
like, divorce was never mentioned, I suppose that was really what was happening, but no one ever really said anything. And I
Yeah.
think that made things quite interesting because, I mean, for me at least, what ended up happening was that I had a very warped or distorted, like, view of reality, which is our parents were never together, but I thought they were married. And I think as a
Mm.
child, like, if you're not told those things, obviously
Mm.
you're not going to think otherwise. But
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how all those developments sort of shape your reality on family and the world and how you experience those things.
Yeah. To add on to that point, I think even with our own memories and things like that, like I remember asking dad once, why don't you kiss mom?
Mm.
Like I remember asking, because when you're a kid, you can see how things are happening, and you can only really know what you're feeling inside with uncomfortability or like things like that. So you don't really know what's going on. But yeah, I think because we were never really told the full story until a lot later, I think that really warped our perception of our family and our view on family.
Mm.
um yeah, what do you think was the hardest experience while you were younger witnessing? I don't know if you remember a lot of it, but
Well, I mean that brings up an interesting point, which is that we've both talked about in the past, which is how our experiences of childhood were extremely different.
mm,
Um, I mean, that could be because of age. It could be because somehow of gender. I mean, I don't think so, but it could be, at least in some part. Um, but I think what I find most fascinating about like the history that we've had is that um, even though we come from the same family and we have the same relationships in the sense of we live in the same family, our experiences and our memories have been completely different.
yeah.
Um, do you want to get into a bit more detail about that?
Yeah, sure. um well, I know that from just with our conversations that we've had before, I think I remember a lot of the stuff that was happening, things that I remember you telling me that you didn't even remember happening. Like I remember dad being like, yeah, I'm out, like the conversation, like I still remember that, things like that. And yeah, just situations, even though I was so young, I was like what, 6 or 5 or 6 7, when a lot of the fighting and things, not nice things, were going on. I still remember a lot of it. And yeah, just the memories revolving around things like that. And from the conversations that we've had, I know that some of the stuff that it didn't, I don't know if it affected you differently, but maybe because I think I've always been quite sensitive and always very observant. I think I always was just watching the situation and always trying to analyze it. And I
Mm.
think that's why I remember a lot of things more. I think even now I still do that. I always am pretty observant, and I always that sounds
Yeah,
so bad to say I watch people. That sounds so bad. But as in like, analyzing situations. I think maybe that's why I remember. But yeah, what about
yeah.
you?
No, I mean, I think that also ties into like personality types. Maybe certain personality types are more like predisposed to certain things. Like
Yeah.
neuroticism is a personality trait, which is like your level to feel negative emotion. And
Mm.
perhaps if you are of that personality type, you may be more susceptible to feeling more heavily impacted by family fights or troubles and stuff like that. But
Mm.
yeah, like I mean, there's so many instances where you've said to me like, "Oh, do you remember when this fight happened?" And I'll be like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" And
Yeah.
it's very bizarre because, and I think this is like an interesting point for that others can draw upon, which is, um, and I think you can also observe this even if you don't have family, where even with friends, it's like you go on a trip with friends or something, and then there'll be something on that trip that is really stood out for you, like, oh, do you guys
Mm.
remember when we did this? And they'll be like, what?
Yeah, I
And it's
remember.
sort of a really interesting point of like how we perceive reality, which is we perceive it through our own eyes, not through the
Yeah.
eyes of like the objective sort of not through like an omnipotent sort of God view, like this is what happened and this is how exactly it went. It was
Yeah.
interesting. So I find it really fascinating how that has shaped us and how even to like this day, like you said, like there's things that you still remember, whereas there's things I don't remember.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think it's interesting about the personality factor. Like, if you're more, if you're more like sensitive, is that why you remember more things, or different personality traits? It's interesting to think about, like why we actually remember certain different scenarios, if we were in the exact same situation.
mm, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
good point.
And I mean, so coming back to like this, the I guess the timeline of what was happening. So we moved to India. At some point in time, our parents started fighting, and then they moved, and then our dad moved away. What was it like to sort of see, from your experience, like a two-parent household become a one-parent household?
Yeah. I think going back to memories, I think from what I remember now and with hindsight and everything, I think it was hard for me to process more so now than it was at the time, because at the time, like I said, I was just kind of observing what was happening. I didn't really know how to feel about it because I didn't honestly know what was going on, right? We only knew what we knew. And I think seeing that split from dad being there and then dad not being there and then mom being the one primary caregiver to us,
Mm.
I think it was hard for me because I was so aware of my surroundings and I was so observant of the situation. I think I witnessed a lot more on mom's side and how it affected her, and I think that ultimately affected me
Mm.
because when you witness, even if it's you, not even yourself, but if you witness someone you care about going through a really really hard time, ultimately that will also affect just witnessing it. So I think it actually affected me a lot more as I grew up because I started to process the situation more. And I think when we learned a lot more deeper in the situation, I think it affected me more because I knew what was going on. And now that I had the idea of what was happening at the time, it made more sense to me now. I think it affected me more. And yeah, that split between the households, I think at the time I didn't know how to feel about it, but yeah, I was just kind of more observing and
Mm. Um,
seeing.
yeah, no, I mean, I asked that question specifically because I actually don't have any memory of that.
Mm,
Like, I actually don't even remember when it happened. Like, I just
mm,
remember there was a time when he was there and then he wasn't there. And I
mm,
find that really interesting because, I mean, you said that you sort of recall memories of that happening. Whereas,
mm,
like, for me, I don't remember that at all. And I feel
yeah.
like it's very bizarre because you would think that you would remember such a
Mm.
big point.
Yeah, and even I think the age thing as well, because you're a lot older. It's interesting how even though I'm like a little bit more younger than you, the perception of even knowing what's going on. I feel like it's interesting that you were older yet I was the younger one who remembered more. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and I think that ties into maybe other families and other people's experiences is that perhaps if you have siblings or even like if you're in a situation where something bad happens amongst a friend group, you may be wondering like how like do these people feel the same way I do in like these situations? And I
Mm,
think the answer to that is that it really depends, and like the only way to know is actually asking those people because like we only figured out that we had like I mean to give people context, I think like you and me had like a lot of like tension between each other because we shared different memories
mm,
of what happened
yeah.
between our parents, and so that caused conflict between us. Like, well, don't you remember this, like this happened? And I'd be like, no it didn't, like what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then so I think that comes to like a really interesting point of like actually having an understanding of what is happening, and how
Mm,
the only way to really understand what is happening is to ask the other person, because like
yeah.
for us we only really understood each other once we started being like, oh wait, you didn't remember when this happened, like even though
Yeah.
it's like so such a big moment.
Yeah.
um
And it's interesting because it's like you realize how important it is to actually speak about everything. Because with our experience, I had a lot of, because I remembered a lot and compared to you where you didn't remember as much, I think it affected me to a greater degree. That's why I was
mm,
more so emotional towards the situation because just like I said, different experiences and different memories. And I think, yeah, it's super important to be able to talk to people about it and actually dig into why it is affecting you so much. And I think we kind of, like I said, like you said, we were butting heads a little bit, but once we actually figured out, oh, why are we actually reacting this way, it helped a lot.
we talked about how we moved from India, and then how our parent, our sort of family unit moved from like a two-parent household to a one-parent household. So what did that mean for you, and what ended up happening?
To touch more on the point about just witnessing, mum, to give everybody a little bit more context. For a long time, I don't know about Xavier, but from my childhood when I was growing up, just witnessing what that split was like between when dad was there and then when he wasn't, and everything turned into more of a single parent household. I think learning now what happened, which I don't know if we'll get into, but at the time, seeing that switch and then seeing a parent that was really distraught a lot of the time and just affected by the situation that was happening, rightly so. But as a kid, you don't really understand, right? At least in my perspective, I was only observing what was going on and just not really understanding what was happening, but knowing that I had a parent that was upset and I had a parent that suddenly wasn't there anymore. And with mom, I think for a lot of the time she was really distraught, and I think I started to develop a habit of kind of just not really opening up and not really just being expressive with my emotions, because I kind of had this thing of, oh well, if my parent is upset, is that okay for me to be upset? Like, is it okay for me to cry as well if she's crying? And is it okay to be emotional if you have a parent that's already distraught enough?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, you keep going.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that affected me for a long time, just being able to communicate my feelings. And if I was feeling sad, for a long time, I always just kept it to myself. And it was kind of ironic because even though the situation that was happening, even though witnessing a parent that was so distraught, it was also ironic in the sense that I didn't even know what was going on, and it was always kept hidden. It was never talked about. It was always just emotion, but never explained why there was emotion, until recently. But at the time, that was what was happening. And I don't know what it was like for you, but what did you experience?
Yeah, so I mean, this comes back to like the previous point we were talking about having shared experiences but different realities. Like for me, I do not recall uh like mum being in those like really distraught situations. Like I think the whole behavior was normalized for me perhaps, but like I don't even remember that very vivid memories of like negative emotion like surrounding her. Like perhaps like there was like instances of like bad like fights happening between her, whether it was like us or like dad or stuff like that, and then that would lead to people being upset. But I don't actually recall like a lot of moments like, and I don't know why that is the case. Perhaps it's like just internalized like suppression of memories, but like even then like I like there's a lot of negative memories I remember, but none of those are within that sort of picture. So I don't think that's the case. But I mean, I think it touches on like a really interesting idea or something for people to take away from these sort of situations, which is like what we learned, which is when families and when people, more specifically within families, express like they're upset and they express emotion, but they're not really explaining that emotion, and it can make us feel certain ways as well. So it's like when mum was upset, um, even though she was the main person that was upset in the situation, that has impacts outside of her. So you were impacted by it. I, to some extent, was. The people around her were impacted by it, and because there was like no ability to sort of voice what was being felt, what that led to was people like yourself like feeling like you're not allowed to actually like express how you're feeling. And I think that's a really interesting point for other people listening as well, if they feel like they've had a similar experience, which is that I think this is quite common. I mean, obviously, we're drawing on our own experience, so it's hard to say. But I think
Yeah.
when we see someone that we care about going through something that's rough, and we don't have like the language to actually understand that and ask about that, it like turns into something that is quite unproductive
Yeah.
and unhealthy, which is instead of actually asking about it, you actually don't talk about it
Yeah.
like at all.
Yeah, and I think it's also a situation also with that kind of stuff where you kind of feel like you can't really express your emotions. It's almost like if you do it, there's some guilt revolved around it. Like if someone's having a hard time and you're putting that, it's like almost you're putting it onto them, which shouldn't be the case. But I think that's why it holds a lot of people back from doing that. I know I experienced that. So yeah, I think that was an important point to touch on, that you can feel like it's almost guilty for feeling upset as well when you shouldn't, but situation.
Yeah, and that also touches on attachment theory. I mean, we tried to talk about it earlier, but just touching on it really, really briefly. Like, if anyone's interested, it's a really interesting theory that goes into like how you were raised as a child and how that impacts your relationships with people. And I think we observed with like our mum, which was that if there was a situation where something bad happened, instead of speaking about those things, what would end up happening is that those important topics, whatever that person was feeling or important things to discuss, were avoided.
Yeah.
And
And I think also,
you go.
yeah, sorry, I was going to say, and I think also at the time, I never blame mom for a lot of stuff, because I know that if we look at it from her perspective, we're actually really young. So I know that you wouldn't have gone to a child and been like, oh yeah, this happened and this happened,
Mm.
But I think growing up over time, it was similar situations, because it was more of a situation where it happened long term more so than just the situation that was happening. I know with a lot of situations that happen within families or relationships, a lot of times that situation, you react to the situation as you normally would, but I think it becomes an issue when that actually starts extending over time and it's not been dealt with. And I think we both experienced the aftermath of when some situation goes wrong, how that actually, if it's not been healed or resolved, that it can actually just extend and keep repeating itself.
Yeah, there's this really good children's book. I forget the name of it, but it's about this boy who has like a dragon, like a pet dragon, and it stays in his room. And then ends up eventually is that what ends up happening is that the dragon gets bigger and bigger. And then the child goes to his parents and says, "Hey, mom, there's like a dragon in my room." And then she says, "No, there isn't." And then the dragon keeps getting bigger and bigger. And basically, the story is like a metaphor of how the dragon represents an issue, like a problem that is happening. And when it goes unaddressed, the dragon gets bigger and bigger. And then it gets to a point where the dragon gets so big where it actually picks up the house because
Wow, yeah.
people are not addressing what is going on. And even though it's
Yeah,
so obviously right there,
yeah,
people don't address the issue. And I think like
yeah.
that comes down to like conditioning. And I think other
Mm,
people can probably relate, which is if you observe like the people that have having issues, is that those issues come from like a certain place, and it's not
yeah,
like they're trying to be a bad person or they're doing it intentionally. It's just like they have learned behaviors from their experiences in their childhood which they're
yeah,
carrying into their lives.
yeah.
And I
And
think that's
touching
what
on,
yeah, you go.
I was gonna say, and yeah, and touching on the attachment theory, I think sometimes people haven't even been taught how to even express their emotions, because they've been in situations where if they have, or it's been rejected, or situations where you feel like you actually can't talk about it, or if you do, there could be negative repercussions. So I think sometimes some people don't even know how to express their feelings and how to feel comfortable doing so, because it can be quite uncomfortable to be like, hey, I'm feeling sad. No one likes to talk about negative emotions and feel negative emotions, so I think it's important to learn how to actually be comfortable with doing that,
Mm.
and healing.
And I think like for us, I mean, speaking for me at least, I've only learned to do this very, like, I guess, effectively recently. And I think because it's something we've been conditioned with as kids, and I'm sure there's so many other people. I know men in general have this problem of expressing feelings as opposed to expressing thoughts. But I think that we experienced is that we were unable to actually express those things in family. And what we ended up doing, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I'd be interested to hear what you think. But like for me, I started I started looking for ways of expressing myself through like relationships with people, like really close friendships, or even having like my girlfriend at the moment, being able to actually think about it, then feel it,
Mm,
and then
yeah.
express it. Like like it sounds like really stupid, but like I know for me at least, like it's still something I have trouble doing, and I think a lot of people do. And I think when
Yeah.
you have a family where that's never been taught or expressed, it can cause a lot of dragons to be created where
Yeah.
Everyone feels a particular way, but no one's saying it. And
Yeah.
everyone can feel that there's a problem, but no one's expressing that they feel that way. And then basically it's like you're living with like a dragon who's sitting in the middle of the table and you can't see the other person, but at the
Yeah.
same time no one's saying that there's a dragon there.
Yeah. No, I agree.
But what about you? What was your feelings about sort of like learning to express how you felt about things and expressing emotion and all those sort of things?
Yeah. Well, going back to the whole emotional side, I think it took me a very long time to even express my emotions because, like I said, we grew up in a household for a while, well, for not a while, but quite a while, a long period of time. We just never really talked about what was going on. And I think I really brought that up into my young teens. I really struggled with being able to even say that I'm not okay because I think if you've previously expressed it even as a kid and you do it a lot and it's always rejected, it almost feels like there's no point in saying anything because even if you do say anything, nothing's going to change. And it took me, like I said, it took me a really long time just to be able to even speak about anything. I don't know if we're going to talk about mental health or anything like this, but I went to therapy for a really long time, and even I remember even going to a therapist was really uncomfortable for me. It was really hard for me to be even talk to some random stranger about why I was feeling upset, and why it was so hard for me to open up. Um, yeah, it's interesting that you can develop that and actually feel uncomfortable with, even just saying that you're just having a bad day or, a few bad days.
Mm. And I think for those who are interested in attachment theory, I mean, you touched on like two interesting things as well, which is like sometimes we choose not to express our feelings because one, it's not being reciprocated. Like
Mhm.
we tell a parent or we tell a friend, like, oh, this thing happened to me. And they say, like, they give, like, sometimes they'll be positive and sometimes they won't give any response. So you get like mixed signals from people.
Mm.
Or what can happen is that you tell someone and they don't react at all. And
Yeah.
like I think for people that have trouble with expressing emotions, I mean, at least in my experience and like what I've observed personally is that perhaps we choose not to express ourselves because we've had experiences in the past with us expressing our
Mhm.
emotions and then those needs have
Yeah.
not been met because we've tried to tell people like, hey, I'm feeling this way, but if they don't actually care, or not care, but if they don't, yeah, I don't think care is the right way to put it, but if they don't meet us where we are, then that can
Yeah.
mean that we sort of close ourselves off. I think we
Yeah.
both experienced that to some degree. I mean,
Yeah, and I
you
think
say a lot more
also,
than me.
mm, and I think also especially if you open up to someone that you really trust. Sorry, my phone was going. If you open up to someone that you really, really trust, and then it's rejected completely, it's super hurtful because, opening up is already hard in itself. And if you've had past experiences where you felt rejected and then that reinforcement, it pushes you back even more.
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I mean, I think what worked for us in those moments was to look for people that could give us those sort of, that could, I guess, treat our grievances or like our sort of needs with the support that it required, or just the support that we were looking for. But
Mm.
going back to the timeline, so I mean, we talked
Yeah.
about, at the beginning of like us moving overseas, and then how a two-parent household became one, and then what that led to, like us not being able to express how we felt. But what came next on that timeline for you in terms of like our family's development and stuff like that?
Um, well, after the whole development stuff of just our experience in India and witnessing all that stuff, I don't really remember too much after a certain period, which is kind of funny because I remember the more the parts that you think you forget.
Mm.
Um, but I guess we could move to when we moved to Australia.
Mm.
I think that was a very significant change, not only in our own family, but our own personal development. I think that we both had individual hardships with coming back and learning our identity and who we were. I know that you've told me in the past that, you had a lot of a hard time feeling like you were not any different from anybody else. You know, in India we were foreigners, and I think that was a part of our identity to some degree.
Mm.
um yeah, I think we both had issues with that, and just learning how to not be special, but like, you know, feel like you're important around a crowd that's probably exactly the same as you know.
Yeah, I mean, like it sounds like ridiculous, but I think and I think that comes more into like personal identity issues. But I
Mm.
think a lot of people, and I've spoken to quite a few people that have lived overseas and then they've returned to their home country and they sort of feel like, where do they belong? It's like
Yeah.
which tribe am I a part of?
Mm.
Um, like am I what does this mean for me? But I know for you, like I know for our family, like there was that moving from India where we'd spent 10 years and then moving to Australia where even though we were citizens of that country, we did not feel at all like attached to that. And I
Yeah.
remember like when we were in transit in Indonesia, I think you had quite a like a, I guess a breakdown, so to speak,
Yeah, in
about
Bali.
yeah, where you were sort of coming to terms with what actually was happening and what you were feeling.
Mm.
Do you want to
Yeah.
do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I haven't really ever expressed too much about that trip, but yeah, I was only like 13, but I was super distraught that time, because I think even though I was so young, I think maybe it was due to our experiences, or just living abroad and just experiencing just a lot of life experience at such a young age. And I think even just our family issues and having to learn how to navigate through that. I think that time I was super distraught, because I kind of had this mental breakdown of, I didn't really feel like anyone really understood what I was feeling. I think because I was so, oh no, I'm okay, I'm fine, like I don't, there's nothing to worry about here, like I'll be fine, I'll deal with it. When you're so like that for so long, and you're too independent with dealing with your emotions, it's so uncomfortable to open up. And when you finally do and then it's rejected, it's super difficult, because you know, after being so closed off for so long, and then finally being like, no, I'm okay, I'll just express it and I'll just let it out, because you know, you should do that. And then it being rejected, it was super hard for me. And even though I was so young, I was so mentally affected by it. And it's still such a pivotal moment that I look back on and I think, wow, I was so young, but it was such a pivotal moment for me to go, oh wow, I had a really bad breakdown, and I was really not okay at that moment. And you know, I don't blame anyone for even in our family, not you, no mom, not anyone, for how everyone reacted in that situation. Because when I think of it, I was only 13. You know, a kid 13 being like, oh, I'm not okay, I feel like I want to die, I feel like, you know, you feel really uncomfortable, and you just feel like really shitty, you know. No 13-year-old feels like that, you know. I mean, I'm sure there are, but at the time, when you think about it from an outside perspective, it's really hard to think that a 13-year-old is really, really not okay, you know? But yeah, so I don't blame anyone for that experience. But yeah, I think that was a very pivotal moment for me to really look back and be like, wow, I was really young, and it really affected me.
And how do you think it tied into family? Like why was that moment tied with family and what did that mean?
I think because family was always something complicated for us. Um, you know, I think maybe it was because we grew up in India and because we saw so many families. I think I experienced a lot as a kid with even just being at school and seeing other people's families. Like I remember telling you about the time one of our old friends, I remember his grandma visiting and just like giving cookies to everyone in class. And I remember feeling so sad, because I was like, I wish I had that kind of thing, you know? Because it's really sad when it's in front of you, and seeing that kind of stuff. Anyway, but yeah, going back to the experience and stuff, I think it just affected me with family, because it, I don't know, I think family has always been very emotional to me, because you know, I find family very important. And because family is the first people you ever come in contact with, right? People that care about you, people that teach you lessons, raise you, all that stuff. I think it's even more emotional when you almost feel rejected by them, you know? So I think that's why it affected me so much with family, because, you know, they're the closest people to you, and yet sometimes you can feel like they're most distant to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think I think where like family, like for us, got interesting and also very difficult, because I think on one hand, you were sort of emotionally ahead of everyone, like we were all sort of like cut off, so to speak, whereas you
Mm-hmm.
were actually feeling things, and we were all sort of like, why is Tara like feeling things? I mean, we didn't, that's not what we said, but that's basically like
No, yeah.
the reaction, like feeling like what, like sad, like
Yeah.
I mean, none of us actually said that, but that's basically what was happening. And I think
Yeah.
that was like a really interesting moment, because that's when I started realizing, like, as a family, like there was like issues. And I mean, I'm sure everyone else comes to their own conclusions with their own family. Like when they grow up and they grow older, they start recognizing things, and they start becoming more aware and mature that, oh, okay, so this doesn't have to be this way. Like I can actually improve, and like the way I'm treated, actually, this can be better, or things can change. Like it doesn't have to be this way.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that was a really interesting part. And I think as well as that, I think it started leading us to start questioning our own parents, which I think when kids grow older, they start doing a lot more of. Like when you're an adolescent, like when you're a teenager versus you start transitioning into an adulthood. I think
Yeah.
for me, at least, like speaking from my experience, there was a lot of times, like even still now, like even though I'm still quite young, I'll be thinking like, why was this way? Like why did we grow up in this circumstance? And obviously being grateful for all the amazing things that we had to us, but at the same time, with taking all that being grateful for all those things, also taking into account all the things that didn't go well, and like
Mm.
questioning those things, and like asking ourselves like how come we were like this, and why were we like this, and what caused this,
Yeah.
and why did it have to be this way, and why couldn't it be different? And I think
Yeah.
I know people around me have expressed similar feelings. Like as they get older, they just start realizing that their parents are just people,
Yeah.
and people are no different to parents. And
Mm.
I mean, it sounds stupid, but
Oh, yeah,
I
it's
think
true
we
though.
start to realize that like we place our parents on a pedestal,
Mm.
and we think of them as like people are beings that are like superior to everyone because they
Yeah.
gave birth to us and raised us. But in reality, like we're actually no more, they are no less fallible than we are. And
Yeah.
they've been informed by their experiences, good and bad, and they're just teaching us what they've learned, good and bad.
Mm. Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. And like, you know, it's like if we grow up, when we grow up and have children, we probably will make the same mistakes, you know, not the same ones, hopefully, but like, you know, we'll make mistakes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, exactly. And I think that's sort of like a part of growing up, was you realize that um, eventually, if you choose to have children, or even if you don't have children, just like you're going about life, you start realizing that like you will have problems yourself that
Mm.
you will inadvertently transfer to other people, like as in your kids, or maybe you just sort of put on to other people. And like it's not because you're trying to do that. It's just because you've inherited certain values and certain ideas of what things should be. And there's a lot
Mm.
of good and bad in that. And
Yeah.
that results in people missing each other, like in terms of like they're not meeting each other where they are,
Mm.
or things are not expressed in a healthy way. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think that comes back to maybe a more positive note, which is like, I think because we observed so many things that we didn't like, or like weren't great, to put it like to put it simply, is that now we know what not to do.
Yeah.
But then also as well, we also do know what to do, because there's also in each family, as much as there is bad, there is good. And
Yeah.
it is like a
Yeah.
constant attempt to sort of take all the good things. And then
Yeah. And
also,
I think
yeah, you go.
that I was gonna say, yeah, I think that's why it was also hard for us a little bit, because even when I think about it, we were so privileged and we had so much opportunity to experience, and we did experience a lot. And so I think that was always a hard line to figure out of, is it complaining if we complain about the bad stuff? Like, we have so much good stuff that's going on. Is it bad to, is like complaining for us to talk about this stuff, you know?
Mm.
So I think, yeah, that was a line that we had to kind of learn what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think like people like YouTubers or like celebrities, and I mean, we're not, I'm not suggesting that we're anywhere like in that capacity, but in the sense of like people sort of gatekeep emotions, in the sense it's like, if you have this and that, you're not allowed to feel bad. Like, you
Yeah.
have all these things, like how come you're not, like, why are you complaining? Shut up.
Yeah.
And
And
I
even
think,
like the,
yeah, you
yeah,
go.
I was gonna say, even the comparison to like even people that are in worse situations, like I
Yeah.
think there'll always be that situation, you know, there's always people that are even better situations than you are, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's even a hard thing to not feel guilty for, if you have a lot of things, and you
Yeah.
know.
I think it's very paralyzing as well, as like you said, it's relative. And like, no matter the level of status that you have, there's always going to be people higher and lower. And like, I
Mhm.
think being in India, that made it even more, exacerbated it even more, because like,
Yeah.
because we lived in like we lived a very like a good lifestyle, but at the same time we would leave our house and we would start driving, and then there'll be beggars on the streets, and there'll be people
Yeah.
that don't have a house, or they have, you know,
Yeah.
very small house, or have, you know, family that they need to feed, and they don't have a job. And it's like, it makes you think about those things even more and become even more conscious of, am I allowed to feel these things? Like, look at all of this
Yeah.
stuff around me. Like,
Yeah.
I should be so grateful for what I have. Like, I don't have a right to complain. I don't have a
Yeah.
right to express what I'm feeling. But I think what
Yeah.
we realized is that just because you're raising an issue doesn't necessarily mean you're not being grateful. And I think it's
Yeah.
important that you have those discussions and just express how you're feeling. And I think
Yeah.
that's what worked for us eventually, and what we're still trying to work through now, which is like, if anyone is probably watches YouTube and is like living in a Western world, you're probably in the top 10 percentile of the entire world. So I'm
Yeah.
sure there's people that feel those certain things.
Mm.
And yeah, so I think from our experience, we sort of learned that to gatekeep emotions is not healthy, because you're
Yeah.
just closing yourself up for an opportunity to actually tell people what you're feeling.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but going on to the timeline. So we talked about, you know, moving from Australia to India, and then in between us moving, how you had that sort of breakdown. And then
Mm.
us, when we arrived here, we felt we were struggling with a lot of things.
Mm.
What was next for that? And what was next on that for you? Like, what's the next sort of moment that you remember in that timeline?
Well, I remember just when we moved back, it was extremely difficult, especially on mom, because not only did we come to a country where we had literally no one, like, I mean, I don't know how much we want to talk about family and, you know, where the line is with that. But we basically came back with just us, right? I mean,
Yeah,
we
I
didn't
mean, I
really
think it's
have,
okay. I think it's okay to point out that basically, uh, like my mom's side doesn't really speak. Like, she doesn't. We don't really speak with them, and my dad's side is a, a similar situation. A similar
yeah,
situation. But yeah, I mean that.
yeah,
I mean that
yeah,
aside. Yeah, continue.
yeah. So we essentially came back and it was just us, right? And dad was in London at the time. Um, I remember it being really difficult because mom had lost her business and everything in India. You know, we came back to not only just us, but also mum being distraught from the fact that she lost something that was really, you know, really precious to her. You know, mum worked really hard for it, and I think we all kind of felt, um, affected by what, was happening, because we all have our own issues coming back to Australia. Um, for me, after that, I think I started to kind of just go a little bit downhill with after going to school and everything. I didn't have any problems with people. It was more so just myself, right? With what was going on inside of me, and, already dealing with issues within myself and learning how to deal with them while coming back to a home where there was a lot of issues still not being resolved, you know. I think after a while, I remember I transferred from more of a smaller school to a bigger school. And I kind of even went even more downhill for a little bit. I found it really hard to just not even just be myself, but just to feel okay within myself and feel like I was okay, for
Just
a
to
long
be
time.
in general.
Yeah. And I think because maybe it was the influence of what was going on at home, but I just kind of lost a lot of motivation in a lot of things. And a lot of people that knew me don't really know me, like I was not a different person, but I was just very almost lost in a way. Yeah, so I kind of went a little bit downhill. I mean, I know you know the story, but yeah, I think yeah, with the mental health stuff, yeah, I went really downhill, and I went on medication for a long time, which I'm really grateful for. But yeah, what was your experience like? Like, how did you feel with that whole experience and just watching everything go on?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think I was feeling like there was like internally like issues, but I didn't really know how to like label them. Like I just assumed that they were like it was just like to do with moving, and I think most of it was. But I also think there was like a denial of like what was going on internally, and not really having anyone to express that to was similar to what you felt you said, right? Like you knew people, but people didn't really know you. That sort of in the sense of like they didn't know what was going on with your family and your life,
Yeah.
and it's not because it's not their fault. It's just because like we didn't know how to communicate how we felt with people. We didn't know how to connect. And then
Yeah.
also is like, how do you get on a level with people that you're able to talk about those things, especially when you're new in a school with heaps of people?
Yeah.
Because I know,
And
like, yeah, sorry, you go.
I was gonna say, and because we had so many, like, not so many issues, but like being able to connect with people like on a deeper level, I think I even still struggle with that, like how much can I like open up until it's like too much, like oversharing kind of feeling. But
Mm.
yeah, and the way you go.
No, yeah. I mean, I think because the circumstances were unique, like of us like moving back from like a foreign country, it made things like slightly more difficult. But I think like that is also very common. I think a lot of people feel that way, like they're not able to connect. But usually, what you can do is you can go to your family for those things.
Mm.
But like um, I think our family we weren't able to do that, and that's because everyone else was sort of like grieving, almost like grieving the loss of like
Mm.
moving and like losing our lives. Because I
Mm.
mean, for context, like the reason we moved wasn't because necessarily we wanted to, but because we had to, and that was because
Mm.
our like visas were attached to our dad's work, and when he
Yeah.
left India, we had to leave, and we couldn't travel with him, so we traveled back to Australia, and so
Yeah.
there was, I think, a huge like grieving process in that, and we couldn't really sort of talk to, not that we couldn't, but it's very difficult to sort of talk to people like, oh yeah, I feel
Mm.
like crap because I left, like I was living in India and all this stuff
Yeah.
happened, and
Yeah,
then
and it's hard to connect. I was gonna say
yeah,
it's hard to connect with people that haven't ever lived overseas or, experienced similar situation, I feel like in
it's just that,
India.
yeah, it's just like the relatability is sort of missing.
Yeah.
It's sort of hard for
Yeah.
people to sort of understand, which is, I
Mm.
think, which is, I mean, you can't really do anything about that, but try and sort of form relationships with people.
Mm.
And and yeah, But I think that what that meant was that we did a lot of like introspection and a lot of like trying to figure out trying to figure out
how to deal with our problems and
yeah, like how to think
our
about
own.
like yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
like even our own like problems, that's why I think it was even more difficult because we had like some underlying issues that weren't talked about in our family, and then we also had our own individual issues that were going on. So it's like, how can you like integrate the two without it being too much? And
Mm,
like,
yeah.
how do you even like deal with your own emotions if you don't even understand them fully? And how can you deal with another situation? You know what I mean? It's like, how do you learn how to do both at the same time when it's already both of them are a lot in itself?
Mm, yeah, for sure. And I think eventually we were able to do that quite successfully, but that took a long time. So like I know when I was in high school, I think the first 2 years, like so yeah, I returned for grade 11, 12, I was 17, 18. And I would say like those were probably the two worst years I'd experienced. Um, and it's not because those years were like that bad. Like I went to a really good school. People were really nice, most for the most part.
Mm.
We lived in a really safe place. Like we had a house, we had like all the necessities, and we had we had all those
Mm.
things. Like objectively speaking, like we had a good time. But I think, like you said, like there was like so many dragons that were like lurking, like with regards
Mm.
to like family. Like we didn't even know like where dad was pretty much. Like we knew he was
Yeah.
in London, but like what why is he not like why is he
Yeah.
there? Like why is he
Yeah, and
not
like how
here?
can you even how can you even talk to a parent that's so far away as well?
Yeah.
Like it almost feels like they're not a part of the family anymore when it's just you and your family. How do
Yeah.
you even like, I
And
don't
I
know,
think that
it's
and I think that touches
mm,
back to people that may feel similar ways for single parent households is like
yeah.
if you're very disconnected or completely disconnected from the other parent and the parent that is in your care doesn't want to talk about it, what do you
Mm,
do? Because it's like
yeah.
there's an obvious not maybe not it could be an issue. There's an obvious thing there. Like there's a situation.
Yeah.
And I think with issues that are or like situations um that are as big as that,
Mm,
like the only way you can sort of gain closure from them is by expressing and understanding what had happened and why do
mm.
you and like what was the situation, why do you feel the way you feel, why did they feel that way, how did that sort
Yeah,
of
and
happen.
sometimes, yeah, and in our situation at the time, we didn't even know what was going on, right? So it was even
Yeah.
more confusing because if we think about the situation, what was going on, we knew that mm, dad, we was never confirmed that dad and mom were not together anymore. So it was always like this weird thing of, well, are they together? Are they not? Because dad's not here. So what even is that?
Yeah.
So I think we always had that weird internal battle of, are we even a family? And like, how do we
Mm.
connect? Like, are we even connected? Like, are we a family unit?
Yeah, I mean, like are we even a family, but even like what is a family, because it's
Yeah.
like even I mean for context we have like a younger brother, like he's 6 years
Mm.
younger than me or 2 years younger than you, and like he was so little, and so it's like his
Yeah.
definition of family was one where our dad was away and that was that,
Mm.
whereas our definitions are
Yeah.
really different because we were older and we saw that he left. And so there
Yeah.
was also like this interesting dynamic where we both had a problem with it, whereas our younger brother didn't really know any better because he was just so
Mm.
little.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, I think going back to like single parent households, like I think it was very difficult, but I'm sure a lot of people can sort of
Mm.
gain an understanding like of what that looks like. Or if you don't come from a single parent household, you can get an insight of what that looks like what that looks like when people are not talking about it as well.
Mm.
Um, but
Yeah.
I mean, going on to I guess I guess coming to the end of the timeline, close to it. But um,
Yeah.
I mean, the next part I think of is like when you were going through, that tough period you were going through, and then I graduated high school.
Mm.
That sort of weird sort of time,
Mm.
um, and figuring out and coming to realize a lot of things,
Mm.
specifically that like stuff about infidelity with our dad, and then like coming to realize that there's other parties involved apart from just our parents, and then like
Yeah.
trying to
New family dynamics.
trying to like understand like what does this mean, like how do we
Mm.
navigate this? So like, what was that like for you, like that whole period? And yeah.
Well, it was more difficult because not only was it like the family issues, but if I separate the family issues, even with myself, I was going through a really difficult time, like I was saying, with mental health and stuff. It really, for a long time, affected me. And there was like this 3-year period, like where I was like around 13, 14 to like 16, 17. There was like that period where it was very dark. I went through a lot, and like I said, I was on medication for a really long time. I was going to therapy nearly every day. I had like a counselor, Danielle, in my school, and I literally would go to her like nearly every day, and I felt so bad for her because I was like unloading my issues on her. But no, it
That's
was a really
interesting as
dark
well, because
period.
you had felt that way because also of our conditioning, like we weren't allowed to say what we were
Mm,
feeling as well. But yeah,
yeah.
sorry, continue.
No, yeah. And I think because it was such a really bad period. Like not, I wasn't around good people. I was overweight. I was just, if you're not right up here, you're not right anywhere. So it took me a really long time to just even just learn how to deal with what I was going through. And then on top of that, with all the issues that came out with dad and new family dynamics and learning the truth about certain situations, and feeling like you've been deceived, or feeling like things weren't told to you that should have been told to you a lot sooner. um that was really hard because at that period that I was still going through all my stuff, it was also happening. So not only did I have my own bad stuff that was going on, but on top of it, I also was dealing with the family stuff, right? And I think that's why, to some degree, it affected me even more so, because I had not only, like I said, my stuff going on, but like the family stuff. But yeah, I think it was hard because it was already difficult to deal with the stuff that I was dealing with, and then have to learn how to deal with a new, completely different situation, and even just finding out things that I never should have found out in the ways that I did. Um, it, and being hurt by those things, and I remember when dad did come back and he got a job, just for context, he got a job back in Australia. And this was like the first time that we had ever really been with dad, I think, honestly. Like there was that 2-year period where he had come back, and we were all kind of learning how to deal with it and with the situation that had been presented to us. Um, but no, yeah, I think I found it difficult just because it was not only the stuff that I was going through, but learning how to be okay with everything that I was going through mentally, and also what was going through our family. Yeah, what about you?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think I think again, like this comes back to like negative family ideas or ideals. I think for me, like I was imagining that our family would be like the conventional family of like husband, wife, and then kids, and sort of everyone is fine and comfortable. And I mean, maybe there's like hiccups along the way, but more so that's what it looks like. And I mean, I think really quickly that that idea was shattered, like after coming to find out certain things that
Mm-hmm.
happened with dad and stuff like that. But I think like for me, like the important thing was like coming to I guess terms with like everything that had happened, like coming to terms with the idea of
Mm-hmm.
like it's okay that families don't end up perfect. um
Yeah,
I think that was something I struggled with.
yeah.
um Also coming to terms with like the ideas of expressing expressing oneself in like a healthy way, and trying to tell that to your parents. um because I think for the most part it wasn't until you started going through thing until you started going to therapy that I started realizing that, oh wait, speaking about emotions is like the good thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think it was just because of conditioning we weren't able to do that. But I started doing that myself, and although I was bad at it, eventually I think I started getting quite good at it. Not good at it, but I started getting better at it, is a better way of saying it. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think this all serves for like a really interesting point for people to that may have similar experiences, which was like, I think all of these developments were like everything that happened was meant to happen in a sense. Like we were able to, despite it being really, really hard at times, and like despite at times feeling like it wouldn't get better. I mean, I think as we grow, like, so, like, you know, there's like that sort of platitude, like everything gets better with time. Like, even though I hate like platitudes and stuff, I think it's like oversimplifies things.
Yeah.
I think what ends up happening is like when you grow older within a family is that you start seeing things with more and more complexity and a much deeper understanding. And when you're able to understand things at a much deeper level, a much more like nuanced way, you're able to make sense of things more. So like even though like there was a lot of things that negative things that happened in our family, as we got older, we were able to make sense of things more.
Yeah.
And as we were able to make sense of things more, we were able to understand more and become aware of them. And as we became more aware, I think we got a lot better. And I know,
Yeah.
I mean, that's speaking from my experience, but I mean, I think this has been the case as well for me going to therapy and stuff like that. And, you know, you doing it as well, which is like once you actually understand what's going on and you can sort of put a finger to it and you really sort of, you can sort of
Understand
grasp,
why it's going on.
yeah, you understand why. And maybe it's not you and maybe it's the result of your experiences or your circumstances. I think that's when I think we started seeing things progress a lot more. And I think it's progressed so much so now that we are very quick to identify things and express how we feel about things. Where, you know, if we were looking back where we were like 10 years ago, like being able to express our emotions or like express what we feel towards people, even towards our own family, like I don't think we ever thought that was possible. And even though like there's so much work to be done, like I'm sure you can agree, um, even though there's a lot of work to be done on that front, I think like it's interesting how family is not a static thing in terms of like the state of families. Like it's always moving, and I
Yeah.
think for us, what worked really well, like for you and me, is that when we came to understand things more, we were able to bring that level of awareness to make us feel a lot better.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, I agree. And
yeah.
it was funny because even with the whole talking thing, I remember because we recently went to Uluru where our dad currently works. And it was like the first time in like so many years that I actually had a conversation with him, you know, and just being more open and expressive of how I felt about the situation. And even sometimes you can't get that closure, which is really difficult. And for a long time, I tried to speak about certain situations, but they were never talked about completely. And it was always excuses or always things that were going on. And it's super difficult to deal with a situation where it's really affected you and you can't get closure from it. I'm sure that's something that a lot of people experience. Yeah, and learning how to even get your own closure from it if you can't receive it from the person that did certain things. I know from my experience, after I started working on myself a little bit, I think talking to people and expressing your emotions, why it's so important, is because you actually start to realize that there's so many people that can relate to you, and there's so many people that can give you that closure that you may not be able to receive from the person that hurt you or from the person that you would want it from. You know, that's why relatability is such an important emotion, and talking to people, why that's so important. And it can feel uncomfortable, but when you actually start talking to the right people and you actually start digging into why certain things would be affecting you, actually starts, that's when I think progress starts to happen. You know, like you were saying about the things get easier over time. You know, I never really believed in that, but it's actually when you start choosing to work on yourself and choosing to provide yourself with the things that you deserve and, you know, getting better, then, you know, progress really happens. And yeah.
There was an interesting psychology article from, I think, an association of psychology or something. It was an opinion piece about how um, on this idea of coming back to what's it called? What theory? What was the theory we were discussing before?
Attachment.
Attachment theory. That's right. Yeah, it was talking about how it was asking the question like, if you grow up in certain circumstances, um, can that actually change over time? And they drew a diagram. It basically looks like this. Like, so I'm just going to draw it really quickly. So there's two axes, and I've drawn it wrong. Hold on. Let me draw it really quickly. So, family. There's two axes. There's family, and then there's friends. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? Is it backwards?
No, I can read it.
Okay, cool. Basically, like the diagram in that article was showing how when you're a child, like, so when you're a child, like, your experiences with the family curve start up here, and they're very important as to like how you are socialized impacts how you respond to people, right? But as time progresses, it declines. And as time progresses, your friendships, or the people that you choose in your social circles, the importance increases. And basically, like the article was saying, how over time, what is most important is that we are selecting people that are able to provide us with the emotional needs, so to speak, of like a secure attachment. Because, and that comes to the point you were saying, like, although maybe it doesn't seem like you can get those sort of feelings from those feelings of like comfort or understanding or being seen as an individual from friends, it actually provides an overwhelming amount of validation when, if you've been rejected, or rejected rather, for if you've been rejected from expressing your emotions, or maybe not even rejected but not even acknowledged, if you go to people with those emotions and they accept those, and accept meaning like they see you, they don't question you, and they say, yeah, that's rough, man. Even those things can play such a pivotal role in how you develop as an individual. And I think that it goes to the point where we are at the moment, where although, like we said, like there's a lot of things that require development and require like further work. Like we've both seen that as we've grown older, that the people that we sort of surround ourselves with have led us to being able to form much more deeper emotional connections and meaningful relationships, because we've learned to be able to express our emotions to people that don't reject them, or not even reject them, but are able to see them and accept us.
And it just shows how important it is to be aware of who's in your environment and who you let into your life. And, you know, it just shows the importance of that.
Yeah. And I mean, coming back to family, like I think with our circumstances, like where we are at the moment, I think perhaps in the past, like to try and change things, it would be very difficult, especially if you're younger and your family and you're still trying to figure out what is going on. But I think for us, as we've gotten older, like we've both understood how we can make a positive impact in our families and on our parents. And I think we've started taking steps to teaching our parents things, just as they taught us many good things and a lot of good things. But then us returning that favor in terms of trying to teach them how to do these things, because the reasons they can't is because they weren't taught, but because we have experience in those things. That's what we're trying to do now. And I think that's started to have a positive impact. And I think for people that may have those, who are fortunate to have families and have perhaps the opportunity of reaching out to them and trying to help, I think that's something that works out really well. But yeah, I mean, family's a really tough situation, and I think
it comes back to
you go.
I was gonna say, it comes back to the point where you said in the beginning that the uniqueness of everyone's family and how it's so different, yet we can all still feel the same kind of feelings. That's why I think, you know, it's important to talk about it, because even though someone can be completely different from you, you can still relate on the most smallest things, you know.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So with that in mind, where are you at the moment, like today? So the timeline has come to where you are at the moment, and where are you
Yeah.
with regards to family, and what are your thoughts on that and stuff with all that in
Um,
mind?
well, I think talking about the personal issues stuff, I think the more I started to work on myself and the more I started to just focus on helping and getting better, I think that also healed a lot of the issues with family, because with the whole issues of being able to open up, that was a very big thing for me. And when I started to work on that, I actually started to realize I started becoming more open even with family, and I wasn't as scared or ashamed to be upset about certain things or talk about certain things and call things out if I felt like they needed to be. So I think it's important to, at least for me, what I learned is really be able to feel comfortable within yourself, and that there's nothing wrong with being upset about something sometimes, and that you're allowed to feel upset if you genuinely feel hurt by something. So yeah, with mine, it took me a long time to get myself better and get myself in a good headspace and just really work on myself. But as time progressed and the more I did it and the more I just started to heal essentially even my own self, the more you can actually heal wounds outside of it. So that's where I'm at the moment.
No.
What about you?
Um, no, I think definitely as well. I think that definitely applies is that I think internally when we have things that are plaguing us or causing us a lot of issues, that leads to negative outcomes on the outside world or like externally.
Mm.
And I mean, for me, I think by working on the sort of internal mechanisms and like working on like my own thoughts and like what I'm thinking and how those thoughts may be working against me and working for me, by sort of analyzing those and thinking about those things, I've been able to gain a much more health, like I've been able to live much more healthier and be a lot
Mm.
more satisfied with what I'm doing and how I'm
Mm.
carrying out myself. But I think but yeah, I mean, this is not to say that family is still not an issue and this family is not perfect. I think nothing. I don't think. Hmm. I think it's hard to get to a place where maybe you're satisfied because, well, I don't know
Mm.
about that, but I think it. I
Completely
think
satisfied, maybe.
yeah, I think family is really complicated, and I think the only way to get to a place where you're satisfied is by being able to communicate with those
Mm.
people about how you're feeling and what you're thinking, and be able to move together. But being able to move together as a whole family is also really difficult, and
Yeah,
so yeah.
and sometimes it doesn't even happen. Like there's a lot of people that, have families where no matter how much you try and talk or communicate, it's never changing. So I think even in that, it's important to note that there will always be people outside of even your family that will understand you, and that will help you through things, and be able to understand you completely without ever questioning you or getting angry at you for feeling a certain way. So even if family will always be a complicated thing, and yeah, like you said, I don't think you'll ever be completely satisfied with family. So I think it's always important to note that even if your family isn't someone that you can connect with, there's always people outside of it that can, and that will understand you.
Yeah. And I mean, with that in mind, I think we can start wrapping up the conversation and taking a moment to sort of thank everyone who's listening, and also
Yeah.
uh, also I guess um, like a comment on like families, like it is like super super complicated, and
Mm.
I think, as I was mentioning before, like every family is unique because everyone is unique within that family, and that brings up unique problems. And that doesn't mean that you can't discuss those things, even if there's really great things in your family. I think you're absolutely valid to like feel any negative emotion. And I think it's important that you begin thinking about why you feel those things and exploring those things. And if if family is unable to meet you there and unable to accept, or not even accept, but to listen to how you're feeling about things, and there's, I know, plenty of people around, and eventually you'll get to a place where you'll develop an emotional understanding and intelligence where you can really be able to express healthily to your family what didn't go well and how you didn't feel like your needs were met, but hopefully a place where they'll be able to finally see you for where you are. But yeah, did you have anything, any last thoughts, Tazi?
I know we talked a lot about negative stuff. But there's always positive in family, and I think it's important to not forget that as well. But yeah, I think just in this whole conversation, I think it's been good to be more open about it and, you know, be more open with expressing yourself. And I think that's been a theme throughout our whole conversation is, you know, you should feel comfortable and feel, you know, more comfortable in being able to actually express yourself and feel comfortable with doing that. Yeah, so I think with that note, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I know we talked about a lot of deep stuff. But yeah, that's what I really want to say.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed, and I hope this was of some comfort to some people that may be going through some tough moments, and
and can relate, and and have some sort of closure of understanding that, you know, every family, even though it's different, you can always relate on feelings, and, you know, everyone feels sad, everyone feels unhappy, everyone feels angry sometimes, you know, that's all something that we can relate on. And if this podcast helped in any way, then that's great for it.
Yes.
I mean, great as in it's good that it helped. Yeah.
Stopping.
Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Tara and Xavier.
We're both so fucked up.
Yeah, thanks to our families, which we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, fuck you, parents. You fucked us.
Everyone, I'm Tara.
So, in terms of like introduction stuff,
I don't think I'll be able to do a podcast with you without doing that voice at least a few times.
So like,
yes, so my dad left me. Exposing the tea. Just kidding.
wait, I'm gonna get some water.
Okay, I have my tea already ready.
I've got popcorn.
Can you hear me? Well,
yeah.
No, I posted on my story.
So don't worry.
I can't hear you. It's going off again.
You're a weirdo.
I can't hear you. Your mic.
Yeah, me?
I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Oh, hold on. Maybe it's mine. Let me check. Okay.
Hold on. Where's my water?
Said I'll be on my way. Intermission.
What did that mean for you, and what ended up happening?
I already talked about it if you were listening.
Go for it. You want to drive the ship?
Okay. Yeah. I think I lost it.
Wait, what?
I lost my point. Okay.
Yeah, funny. This video is about stories. We need to know what stories. Because if we don't know what stories they are, then we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because it's like what happens is like we get to a juicy bit and then we're like, oh wait, do we talk about this? No, let's just do it again.
How are we gonna switch the I just realized Sasha's gonna edit this.
And, what the fuck is this shirt?